Good morning. It's time for me to show you my art progress. But first, let me show you what I was reading last night. Recently, I've been talking a lot about newspaper comic strips and their history, and even though I find that fascinating, I'm also interested in all different types of sequential art. We have American comic books, we have the European tradition, and we have the manga tradition. I'm certainly no expert in manga, and not in One Piece, but I read a chapter last night. I'm not going to go in depth about it. This book I actually got on the occasion of Free Comic Book Day. I try to buy something from the store uh, while I'm there. I have volume 1, but I don't have volumes 2 and 3. But I don't think that's a problem per se. This type of writing style is meant to be a kind of a long-going, semi-sequential narrative which catches up the reader for what he needs to know. So suffice it to say, what I liked about the chapter I read last night, which I'm just going to, for these purposes, just say is a typical chapter, is that it told a full story. It was very much like an episode of television, an episode of anime, but it was complete in itself, and yet it pulled the whole story forward. And I would contrast that with the comic books that I was discussing yesterday from the 1970s, well, actually early 80s, the film adaptation of Conan, where that was very rushed, and we really didn't have time to dwell on anything. They had to fit 2 hours of film into, I don't know, 60 pages or so. I really think that this tradition is better for more complicated stories like that. And indeed, if I were Cebulski in charge of Marvel Comics, I would transition Marvel into more of the manga style of selling comics and producing them. Not necessarily copying their art. Marvel has its own style and its own legacy. But the way they tell stories and the way they market stories, I think, is definitely the world standard for comics. Anyway, we'll have lots of time to talk about manga at another day. I just wanted to make a brief update as to my artwork. I finished this strip, and actually while I was penciling it, I was thinking about some Buster Brown comics from the turn of the century that I saw, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to put a little Buster Brown hat here and sort of the outfit. We'll talk about Buster Brown more later. I also finished inking in this page for this monochrome comic. I also painted a few pages here in the small book. I just want to take a moment to mention that even though I work traditionally, I do a lot of work digitally to clean up the image. Sometimes I spend 2 or 3 hours a day doing digital work where I'm just kind of cropping and playing with colors and removing smudges and things like that. So, I mean, even though I'm using traditional tools or semi-traditional tools, that doesn't mean that digital has no place in what I'm doing. So, for instance, I'll probably spend a full hour or more today on the digital version of this image. And what I'll be doing is I'll be cropping, I'll be smoothing out, the color here, I'll be removing smudges. Perhaps not everyone will notice these things, but I think it will look a lot better on the page. The idea is I want all of the benefits of a traditional artwork, which, is kind of imperfect and quirky, but to clean it up digitally, so that the defects of traditional are lessened. And anyway, that's just a little update. Later on today, I will be showing you some Buster Brown comics, and we can talk about the history of comics then. Goodbye.